Parthaya pratibodhitam bhagavata narayanena swayam yasena gratitam purana munina madhye mahabharatam Advaita amrita varshinim bhagavatim ashtadasha adhyayinim amba tvam asusandhanami Bhagavad-Gita bhavadveshinim. O Mother, Bhagavad Gita, I repeatedly meditate on you, who are the 18 chapters in the middle of the Mahabharata, composed by the ancient sage Vyasa, taught for the benefit of Partha, that is us also, by the Lord Narayana himself, the goddess, the shower of the nectar of Advaita, the enemy of rebirth, and the bringer of this knowledge. Chapter 10, title, is Vibhuti Yoga, wherein Krishna, who represents Ishvara, he says, because of my yoga, because of my maya, which remains in potential as nimitta and upadana karanam. In other words, upadana karanam, the material cause of this universe, and the nimitta karanam, the intelligent or the efficient cause of this universe, remains as potential. And this potential is called yoga or maya. And when this potential becomes unstable, this maya shakti, this power, also called yoga, projects this jagat of apparent duality, which we experience and we talk about, and we write stories and poems, and we discuss for centuries after centuries. And this jagat is thus a composition of Maya's Tri-Guna Shakti, because Maya is a composition, a mixture of these Tri-Guna Shakti. And what do we mean when we say it becomes unstable? For example, have you ever had a moment of total contentment, peace? There's no thoughts about anything, maybe even 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. And in that moment, there was no need to think, I'm happy. Nor was there a need to think, I need to sustain this happiness. There was just genuine peace, contentment. Now, how long did that last? It lasted for a certain time. In other words, only to the time ticking, what happened? That peace got disturbed. That peace got unstable. And what is that peace called? Sattva guna. In other words, owing to time, what happened? A samskara, a vasana projected in the mind. And that vasana, samskara, how does it project? As raja guna. In other words, that raja guna is thus activated how? Through the samskara, through the vasana, because of time. And when it does come, what happens to the person? They then express that thought, that vasana, through their physical body. In other words, they need a world now to engage with in order to fulfill that vasana, that samskara. So therefore, peace, pure sattva guna, when that gets disturbed only to the samskara of the individual. Now what do we mean when we say samskara? It usually happens to something about my life, something about that I have to do, something that I did before, could be about some person that said something. It just comes out of nowhere. Is that your experience? You did not even call it, you did not even instigate it. It just comes. Why does it come? Because of this samskara. So in the same way, Maya is, as we discussed in Panchadashi, pure sattva guna. And in this condition of pure sattva guna, it remains stable. And then it becomes unstable. Why? because of the total samskaras of the entire Jagat. So when this, and why does it come? Because time is still ticking in potential. We discussed this last week. Therefore, owing to time ticking in potential, then samskara suddenly arises out of what? The total samskaras of all individuals, and thus Rajaguna activates out of Maya, and this Rajaguna projects this Jagat called the world. And then this Jagat we experience is simply a continuation of the previous Jagat that we have experienced before. So we talked about one Brahmaji day. This day is simply a continuation of the previous universe, of the previous 4.32 billion years. So this is an ongoing cycle. A mass dissolution for a moment, for one Brahmaji night, it rests for 4.32 billion years. Again, it projects. Why does it project? Because total samskaras agitate the sattva guna, and thus Rajaguna projects the universe. And then we experience this universe again. Therefore, Arjuna is now a tourist. He's on a bus. And he's going through this world of Jagat, which is made up of various vibhutis. What are vibhutis? They are manifestations. So the total manifestations called vibhutis make up Jagat. And what is this Jagat? A projection of Maya's Raja Guna Shakti, owing to the unstable condition caused by total samskaras. And what kind of things will now Arjuna see? We will now see as we continue going through the verses. Mrityu sarvaharashchaham udbhavascha bhavishyatam kirti shrirvaksha narinam smritir medha driti hikshama.
I am death that takes away everything, and I am the cause of prosperity of those yet to be. Among the feminine words I am fame, wealth, speech, memory, intelligence, fortitude, and equanimity.
So aham sarvaharaha mrityuhu asmi. So mrityu is the one who puts an end to something. So there are two types of death. The first one is dhanahara, and it is the death that takes away your wealth. That means your title, your position, anything that's important to you, it takes it away. So sometimes a business owner will lose everything. That means that is dhanahara. And there is also pranahara. This takes away our life. Whereas mrityuhu is sarvahara. Sarva takes away everything, swallows up the whole universe. This means at the time of the mass of the samashti pralayam, the whole universe goes back into potential. And we also said previously in verse 29 that Lord Yama, he enforces discipline for those who violate dharma. So whenever someone does something that is injurious to the society, then who is it that comes? Lord Yama. How? For example, the police force. In other words, the principle which puts an end to injury to the society is called Lord Yama. Whereas Mrityuhu is the one who puts an end not only to the adharmic people, but puts an end to the entire universe. Even puts an end to Lord Yama himself. So that's Sarvahara. Therefore, Krishna says here, I am in the form of a destroyer called Rudra. And at the time of Samashti Pralayam, I swallow up everything. And then Udbhavascha Bhavishyatam. There are two desirable ends for every human being. And every human being is not an exemption from these two desirable ends. The first one is Udbhavaha, which means that which happens in a desirable and pleasant way. Plentiful and desirable way. So this includes things like pleasant experiences or comfort. And it includes dharma, artha, and kama. So anyone could use a little bit of artha, kama, and dharma. And the second desirable is moksha, that which is most desirable. course, if the individual does not know what's the implications of moksha, then they won't find it desirable. They'll go back into either dharma, artha, or kama. And then the verse says, I am the prosperity, says Bhagavan, to those who are yet to taste dharma, artha, and kama. So this means that prosperity belongs to Ishvara. This means whatever prosperity you and I have in the future, which we are yet to taste, which we are yet to say, wow, I'm so lucky, yes, thank you. That prosperity belongs to Bhagavan also. Therefore, we cannot even own our prosperity that we try to claim in the future. For example, all of the punya, karma that we have, that does not belong to you, nor me. Why? Because Bhagavan is the one who is the capacity to gather punya and particularize it to one single individual. For example, Bhagavan never mixes up Dev's and Rani's punya papa. So, I forgot, who deserves the punya, who deserves the papa, right? In other words, Bhagavan keeps perfect track of everyone's punya, papa, karma. So that principle to gather that punya and particularize it just to one person, that is also because of Bhagavan. Therefore, we cannot even own our own success. We need to also offer that to Bhagavan. Kirtihi shrihi vak cha nari nam smrtihi metha drihtihi kshama. Okay, this is going to talk about various devatas. Now, last week I said I'm going to explain what a deva or a devata is. When we say deva, it refers to a masculine form of a deity, and a devata is a feminine form of a deity. So if you just say the word deity, that includes both deva and a devata. So what do we mean when we say various devata? Like everything in this universe is just devata. For example, you've got Lakshmi devata presiding over wealth, Parvati devata presiding over Shakti, we've got Saraswati devata presiding over knowledge. You're like, what does this mean? Why so many devatas for everything? When we say that everything in manifestation is associated to a deva or a devata, what we mean is that everything that exists is governed by intelligent laws. That means there's nothing here that is not governed by an intelligent law. And it interacts intelligently with the surroundings, with the environment. For example, the earth rotates around its own axis. Now, if you were to stand in the middle of a room and I say, please start rotating, that would require intelligence, would it not? Because to rotate around your own and not wobble around the room requires actually stability. I need to just rotate around one single access point. So that alone is also intelligence. Or the fact that the earth rotates around the sun is also intelligence in the way that it does. In other words, it doesn't go off, into some other planet out there. So it stays around a certain axis. So that also is nimitta karanam, an intelligent cause, coordinating the relationship between earth and sun. Or for example, when your skin is punctured, then what happens? The blood vessels contract, and then proteins get released to seal the wound and it forms a clot. So this means one single cut, immediately what happens? A series of intelligent causes start to take place immediately. And we don't do any of that, do we? It happens automatically. So this means even at the body level, the stula sharira, even that has an intelligence of its own. And we don't even need to do anything about it. Or if you take the thermodynamics first law, just for simplicity, it says that if you put heat into any system, then that heat, some heat will stay and some heat will leave. So you say, okay, well, so what? But the question is, what dictates how fast that heat leaves or how much of that heat stays? So the speed at which it evaporates or the quantity at which remains, of course, that would depend on how conducive the material is. But that also is an intelligence of its own. So you can call that thermodynamics first law devata. Earth access devata. Earth around the sun devata. Skin repair devata. Immune system strengthening devata. Therefore, what is a devata? All laws in this universe are various aspects of Ishwara's nimitta karanam. And these laws we call Deva or Devatas. Therefore, from now on, whenever I say Deva, you say, oh, who's this Lakshmi and Saraswati and so on? All we're talking about is what? A law from a certain angle representing a certain possibility. Possibility of knowledge, Saraswati. Possibility of Shakti, Parvati, etc. So then the verse now begins and it says, among the female Devatas, in other words, among the feminine gender words, these are all feminine gender words, who am I? Says Ishwara, I am Kirtihi. I am fame born of Dharma. In other words, all of that fame that you have because of virtues that you've put out into this world, because of good things, like good acts, that also belongs to Ishwara. Therefore, any possibility of mass recognition, when we get it in a society, that possibility is because of Bhagavan alone. So even that is my glory, says Krishna. Shri, for example, when we say Shri Krishna, what does the word Shri mean? Everything that is desirable, the most desirable. So if you think of Shri Krishna, then Krishna is the most desirable. There's nothing more desirable than Krishna. Why? Because Krishna represents that which is limitless, Ananda, infinite. And then Vak, which is speech, should be good, which means Hita. Speech should be pleasant, Priya. And speech should be truthful, Satya. We can also use our speech two ways. Our gift to speak, we can use it for either spreading fear, causing more chaos in a society, spreading disinformation for our own ends, or we can use that same capacity of Vak to inspire, to bring peace, to teach using researched knowledge. So this means both ways are also belonging to Bhagavan. Therefore, whenever we speak, never forget Bhagavan. That means, how can you forget Bhagavan? He's even in your very own words that you speak. Then smrtihi. Smrtihi is the capacity to remember good advice when needed. Most of us sometimes get advice and we forget it when it is most needed. So that ability to say, wait a minute, here's what should be done, here's how to deal with this, that capacity, if you enjoy that, that is also Bhagavan's. And how do you improve this capacity? That's a more important question. How do you automatically call forth the advice needed in the right situation at the right time? Through practice. It is useful to have a list prepared what to do in case of an argument. Because you know, in your experience, once an argument comes or there's tension, the last thought that arises is how to, let me look some advice. What happens? The person resorts to their default methods. So one of the things that I've done in my life, and it's extremely useful, is you have your phone, obviously, and on your phone you have a little list, and you call that like a text file, and you call that emotionally disturbed, ? Negative thinking, ? So that's your file. And in that file, you put methods which you think of how to resolve, how to forgive, how to come back to a state of peace. So in other words, next time when a person is in an argument, what they do is, I literally did this for about 5 years. I was having some tension with a customer or someone, and then, well, I don't know how to deal with this because emotion comes, it's too late. So immediately I pull my phone out, 1 second, I go, okay, do this exercise. Okay, so just like me, this person is trying to be happy. Okay, so we're equal here. And then I immediately know what to do. And then the whole tone of the conversation changes. So it is extremely useful to have something prepared because the mind is not thinking about solution mode when it's already in that spin, when it's already caught up in an argument or some tension. Okay. Therefore, how to remember something that is useful? By practice. How do you do that? By having a list available at your disposal, ready to go. Then medha. This is power to reflect and get the essence of a subject matter. So that ability, when you read something and you go, aha, I got it. That power is also Bhagavan's. Then driktihi. This is perseverance or fortitude. This means ability to continue looking at your long-term vision and not get disturbed or not let discouraged by short-term hardships. So when something happens in the short term, then we usually give up. So that ability to continue despite discouragement, something's not working out, I'm not getting as much as I would like to, or I'm not healthy as I want to be, or I'm not learning as much as I could, I'm not remembering as much as I could. The ability to persist through those discouragements, through those moments, is driktihi. Paramarthananda, he calls this being a samsara rubber ball. So learn to be a rubber ball in this world. In other words, you bounce right off. People try to kick that situations happen, but I bounce right off back to where I started. Instead of sticking, that's what we often do. We stick and then we get attached to something and it's hard to pull away. Therefore, be a samsara rubber ball. Kshama, it's often translated as forgiveness. However, it's more accurate to think of it as a capacity of not getting disturbed. In other words, the mind remains equanimous whether something pleasant or unpleasant happens. If a person gets criticized or they get praised, the mind remains, or it doesn't undergo significant changes. So that ability to remain equanimous despite tensions in family, in the world, and the mind just remains on its vision, that is also Bhagavan's. So remember, next time you use your vak, your speech, to talk, to say something, to explain something, or you exercise your Shri, your greatness, in some skill that people find impressive, never forget Bhagavan. Because it is only because of Ishvara that those two are possible. Brahat samatatha samnam Gayatri chandasamaham Masana marga shirshoham Ratunam kusuma karaha.
So too, I am the Brihat Sama among the Samas, Gayatri among the meters, among the months, Margashirsha among the seasons, the spring.
Brihat Sama Tatha Samnam. Among the Sama Veda mantras, I am a mantra called Brihat Sama. And this particular mantra is extremely melodious and auspicious because it glorifies the infinite Bhagavan. Now, Aham Gayatri Chandasam. Among the various meters of chanting, I am the Gayatri meter. And the word Gayatri has two meanings. I will give you both. First, the Gayatri meter. So there are many meters in the Vedas. For example, you got the Anushtup, you got the Trishtup. When we chant the Gita and it's a different meter, it changes? That's called Trishtup. This meter that we're chanting is called Anushtup. So therefore, every meter has a certain way of being chanted. If you take the Anushtup meter, the one we're doing, it has 4 padas, which means 4 lines, and every line has 8 aksharas, which means syllables. So if you times 8 by 4, you get 32 syllables in total. Therefore, every single verse that we chant has 32 syllables. Now, what about the Gayatri meter? That has 3 padas. Pada means lines. And every line has 8 aksharas, 8 syllables. Therefore, 3 times 8 equals 24 syllables. For example, let's take the Gayatri Mantra. Tat Savitur Varenyam, 7 syllables. Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, 8 syllables. Dhiyo Yo Nach Prachodayat, 8 syllables. 8 plus 8 plus 7, 23 plus Om equals 24 syllables. Why is now Krishna exalting Gayatri meter over other meters? Because the Gayatri meter is the first meter in the Rig Veda, and every Devata, which we just spoke about, has a Gayatri meter attached to it. Therefore, it seems to be one of the favorites in the Vedic tradition. That's the first one, Gayatri meter. Now, what is Gayatri Mantra? It is the most popular because it is the essence of all Vedas. In one single mantra, it comprises the entire teaching or the vision of the Vedas. Or you could say the entire Brahma Vidya. So the entire vision of oneness, of Advaitam, is within the Gayatri Mantra. So what does the mantra mean? Just look at the words up there. So if you have the word Om, Om represents Ishvara. In other words, the ultimate cause. And it includes the three worlds, which is Bhuhu, Bhuvaha, Suvaha. In other words, it includes the gross world, the subtle world, and the unmanifest world. It includes the waking world that we're experiencing now. It includes the dream world tonight, and it includes deep sleep. These are the only three worlds there are in the entire universe for even every loka. That's the only worlds we go through. Is that true in your experience? Do you have anything other than waking, dream, and deep sleep? Do you have some special place? No. In other words, I am the substratum of these three worlds. And then Tat, that's the next, second. Tat refers to that. So what that? So that Om, that Lord, Varenyam, that Lord is the most worshipful because He is the whole. There's nothing missing. He is limitless. And then Dhimahi. So we either meditate on this Lord as a sadhana, or we can recognize this Lord through the means of Jnana Yoga, which means at the beginning, this mantra is often chanted in kirtanam or different events. How? As a means of reminding myself that the Lord, in other words, putting the thoughts of the Lord in my mind. So it helps the person move away from the worldly thinking into focused Lord, 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 Lord. Eventually, the person no longer chants it as a sadhana, but starts to understand what is the meaning of the actual Gayatri mantra. Therefore, it changes from chanting to understanding. Then we contemplate upon who devasya savituhu. We contemplate on the sun, which is self-effulgent and all knowledge. In other words, I said this some time ago, the sun in the Vedic tradition always represents the absolute highest. Why? Because the sun is always self-effulgent, it is self-shining, and nothing can cover it. Yes, you can say cover it from this point of view, but nothing can, everything that comes close to the sun, what happens? It burns it. In other words, it is like knowledge. It burns anything that comes close to it. And it illumines everything. In other words, there's no darkness on the sun. It is just pure light. Therefore, that sun is compared to Atma or Ishvara. And then Yaha, that Lord who is Bhargaha, which is all knowledge, Prachodayat, last word, may that Lord brighten. Brighten what? Naha Dhiyaha. In other words, may He brighten our minds. May that Lord who is self-effulgent, the sun, brighten our minds. So if you translate this mantra, you get, we are meditating upon the brilliance of the sun God who activates, or which activates our intelligence, our intellect. Now, why would you want to meditate on the sun God? To activate your intellect, to improve your memory, to strengthen your discrimination, right? Your vairagya, your viveka. And why would you want to strengthen your intellect? So that I can contemplate on Atma, Anatma, Viveka, on discriminating the real and the unreal. Therefore, this mantra is meant to be chanted for the sake of sharpening one's intellect, one's memory, one's capacity to hold and to reflect on everything that's being held and then convert it into real life, into actuality. That's the glory of the Gayatri Mantra. And the other glory is it contains the essence of the entire Vedas. How did the Gayatri Mantra come? Because the times were changing, therefore Raja Guna was coming, so people no longer had time to chant the entire Vedas. So Brahmaji, that means the creator, then created a 3-line mantra which summarizes a particular Veda. The first line of this Gayatri Mantra summarizes Rig Veda. The second line summarizes Yajur Veda. The third line summarizes the entire Sama Veda. Therefore, to chant this mantra is as good as chanting all 3 Vedas. It is also said, by those who chant mantras and don't chant the Gayatri Mantra, those mantras are not as effective as they could be. Whereas those who chant the Gayatri Mantra that we just now done, then you don't need to chant any other mantras. As long as you understand the meaning of the Gayatri Mantra, it's not just mindless chanting. Aham masanam margashirshaha. So among the 12 months of the year, I am Margashirsha. This is December 15th to January 15th. Earth-wise, it is a time to sow or to plant seeds, at least in Indian region, because it comes after the rainy season. And astrologically, it is an extremely auspicious time, that is December 15th to January 15th, for any kind of rituals or spiritual sadhana. And what most of us do at the end of the year?
Holiday.
Yeah. In other words, the person, by choosing to go on a holiday, they're throwing away one of the most powerful and effective times for any kind of spiritual sadhana.
It's a holy day.
Huh?
It's a holy day.
Holy. It is a holy month. So that's why every year I'll take a rest at December, because it's a good time for yourself. Or if you're traveling, then it is something that's spiritually related, some temples or some visits or something that involves appreciating the Lord's vibhutis. So next time if I ask you, how was your new year? Then you're probably going to say, well, I was home, or I was contemplating, or I was thinking, instead of I was in Hawaii and I was enjoying myself and all that. So don't throw this opportunity away. And then Ritu Nam Kusumakaraha. I am the spring among the 6 seasons, when people are most joyous and flowers blossom. So in the Vedic culture, we have 6 seasons, starting with spring, and then we have rainy season, monsoon, followed by autumn, followed by pre-winter, cold winter, and then summer. This has been overshadowed by the English system of spring, summer, autumn, winter. So we have a little bit more accurate in the Vedic system. Dyutam chalayatam asmi tejas tejasvinamaham jayosmi vyavasayosmi sattvam sattvavatamaham.
I'm the game of dice among the things that deceive. Of the brilliant, I'm the brilliance. I'm the victory of the victorious. I'm the clarity in thinking of those who have that clarity. Of those whose nature is predominantly sattva, I'm that sattva guna, contemplative disposition.
So asmi dyutam chalayatam. I am the gambling amongst deceitful practices. So anything that has an element of deception is chala, that is gambling. How do you know that I'm gambling? How do you know that you're gambling? The consequence is addiction. What is an addiction? I don't have the power to say no. I know I can't say no, but somehow I find myself doing it. So things like playing card games, alcohol, anything that is highly addictive. Now, we're not saying, a family card game is now gambling, unless this game turns into prize, like I'm going to get some money here and you're going to get some money. Then it becomes gambling. Actually, the Veda prohibits any kind of gambling. And what else does it do? It robs discrimination. It causes irrationality. It incurs a loss. What kind of irrationality does it cause? People end up hoarding more things than they actually need. So they get more than they need. So in other words, it blocks the intellect from thinking properly. That's gambling also. And in the Mahabharata, there's a lovely fella called Dharmaputra or Yudhishthira, who is an embodiment of Dharma. So he is the full example of someone that embodies knowledge of what is right and what is not right, of ethics, and he abides by it no matter what. So he's so good in Dharma that he can put all of us together, 7 billion people today, would probably not match his ability of consistent Dharma, consistent ethics, no matter what. So in the Mahabharata, what happens? Even Dharmaputra gets addicted to the game of dice. And then he starts off how? He loses his little pendant, I believe. And then it's fine, no, it's no problem. And then he even loses his recently inherited Indraprastha, and his emperor status he also gives away. That's not enough. He's still got 4 brothers. So he starts taking one brother after the other. Sahadev, goodbye. Nakul, goodbye. Bhima, goodbye. Arjuna, goodbye. In other words, 4 chances, still can't say no. And then imagine calling your wife over and she's probably, dressing up, putting perfume on in a different room. She's not even in the room playing. And then you go up to her and she says, how was the game? And you say, I've staked you. What? I've staked you. In other words, the intellect got so clouded, so consumed by gambling, that it even, for Dharmaputra, the embodiment of Dharma, lost his balance. Then what is there to say about an ordinary human being like us, you and I? Therefore, how do we deflect any possibility of gambling? Learn to say no right from the start. Because the moment we even think about it, it is already too late. The mind's already formed a trajectory, and it's very hard to stop that trajectory. Therefore, gambling is extremely damaging to one's psyche. Aham tejas tejasvinam. I am the brilliance among those who are brilliant in any field of knowledge. So anyone who's brilliant in their particular field, or they have details about things, or they're able to recall things when necessary, that also does not belong to you or me. It belongs to Ishvara also. Therefore, all brilliance belongs to Atma. And what is Atma? Awareness. All brilliance belongs to Atma alone, which is limitless in power and limitless in knowledge. Therefore, suppose that a person hasn't shifted their identity from the Antahkarana to Atma. So this means anytime a person says, this is my brilliance, is it really their brilliance? No. Why not? Because to say my brilliance, what am I referring to? To all of the knowledge that is inside the Antahkarana. But what is the Antahkarana? That is the mind. It is nothing but a sponge of the external environment. In other words, everything that I know has been sucked from one source, from another source, from the beginning of birth to the present. Therefore, any knowledge that I claim as mine is only borrowed from the outside, which I did not create. I went to people and I got that advice. I saw things and I got that knowledge. Therefore, any knowledge that I say, my knowledge, is actually not my knowledge. Because not only is the knowledge not mine, since the objects are not mine, but the very Antahkarana mechanism is also not mine, because the person did not create their own mind. And the second interpretation is, I am that brilliant discrimination which is able to say no to any tempting gambling opportunities. So whenever the intellect says no, just a little bit, no. That capacity, I also am. Jayaha asmi. I am the victory of the victorious. I am the success of the successful. So if a person ever thinks they're victorious or they're successful, remember, that is also not yours nor mine. That is also Ishvara's. Vyavasayaha asmi. In those who have clarity, because of the effort which they have put, which has led to their clarity, I am both the effort and the clarity. So how do you get clarity about anything?
Putting effort and practicing.
Yeah, and effort implies practice, it implies research, it implies time spent, patience. What else does it involve? Effort. How do you put effort? What is discipline? Interest, good. Energy, huh? Focus, excellent. Concentration, all of that. So many things are involved in that effort. And that effort leads to understanding, clarity. So now Ishvara says both the effort which you have put and the understanding which you have gained as a result of all of those effortful activities is also not yours. It's also not mine. It is also Ishvara's. Margot Fontaine, she was one of the greatest ballerinas. Someone asked her, how is it that you're so graceful in the way that you move? How is it so, spontaneous? And she said that behind this spontaneity and this grace that you see, it comes with years and years of grueling practice. In other words, we as spectators, when we see some clarity about something, like clarity, the definition of movement, the way the woman moves, or the way the person speaks, or the way they express themselves, all we see is that brilliance. But behind that brilliance comes years and years of grueling practice. Now, both that practice and that grace is not ours. That is also Bhagavan. So we also give that to Bhagavan. Sattvam sattvavatam. In the sattva dominant minds, I am sattva guna. This means every mind or every object in this universe is made out of sattva guna, raja guna, tama guna. Sattva guna is when we have a contemplative disposition. Whenever a person is thoughtful, they're a thinker, they like to think, they like to work with knowledge, they're attracted to information or to figure things out. That means the mind is sattva guna dominant. It also involves happiness. So whenever a person experiences happiness, that is a result of sattva guna. Now what about happiness like drugs, like meth or heroin or etc.? That is not sattva guna happiness, that is called tama guna, because any drug actually dumbs down the intellect, thus the person has no more issues in life. That's the first thing that happens. Now then why are they still happy? Because they will say they're happy. Because it releases dopamine. In other words, it releases a superficial chemical and it fills the body, thus the person is not experiencing any personal problems because the intellect is dumbed down. Same with alcohol. And two, the body is full of dopamine. Thus, it says, I'm so happy. So drugs have nothing to do with sattva guna. Sattva guna happiness is just general cheerfulness for no reason whatsoever. Why are you so happy? No idea. That's sattva guna. And sattva guna mind always eventually leads the person to contemplate about pursuing dharma. I want to pursue what is right, what is righteous, what is just. They always do the right thing. Even if nobody is watching them, they want to do the right thing. That is sattva guna. It also leads to a mind being attracted to moksha. Therefore, a mind that is tamasic or rajasic, they will not pursue or contemplate about dharma nor moksha. Only a sattva mind, a pure, peaceful mind, which has a simplified life, will think about dharma and pursuing moksha also. And then rajaguna, that is responsible for energy. So whenever we feel energized in class, hopefully, and not sleeping, and we are ambitious about life in overall, that is the presence of rajaguna. Therefore, you can't now say only sattva guna, please, because then the person will not have time or energy to study. To study, you need what? Energy. To be awake for 5 hours and focus, you need energy. So therefore, this is about balancing sattva guna and raja guna also. Otherwise, we don't get anything done. And the inclination that raja guna leads us to is artha and kama. So whenever we see someone that likes to hoard or collect, or they like to pursue comforts, private jets, private boats, big houses, a lot of things in life, a lot of resources in life, money is very important. All of that is a presence of strong raja guna. Okay. So they're also important because without raja guna, I would not attain anything in life. Thus, I would not be able to study in comfort. I'll be worrying about the bills, etc. So therefore, it is also very important. Tama guna is dullness. In other words, this person with a tamasic mind neither has the inclination to pursue materialism, as in Rajaguna case, nor spirituality, as in Sattva-guna case. Why? Because they are blocked. And they're lazy. That's what laziness does. Now, what do we mean by Tama-guna laziness? Do you know that laziness when we wake up and we want to just stay for 10 more minutes in bed? Are you thinking about knowledge in that moment? No. Are you thinking about activities in those moments? So I am neither sattvic, neither rajasic. I'm just lazy. I'm just in that moment of, I don't want anything. So you can even have the best knowledge right next to your bedside. You're not interested. You just want to spend a few more minutes in that nothingness place. That's called tamaguna. And that is also required, why? To sleep. Without tamaguna, we can't sleep. Therefore, we need to manage these three gunas, which we will extensively cover in the coming chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And the Shastra also recommends to get out of tamaguna, we first pursue desire of materialism, and then we refine that desire into spirituality. You cannot go from tamaguna straight into spirituality. You have to first show the person, here's how you can benefit by being involved in the world. And then the person goes, okay. And then eventually they refine that into sattva guna. Therefore it's a process. So if we now put this in order, how does one pursue, or how is one victorious in their spiritual pursuit? They first come to spirituality with a sattva guna mind. So usually this comes from the yoga world. They've done a lot of sadhana, a lot of breathing, a lot of prayers, a lot of kirtanam, a lot of chanting. So they are extremely prime. Their mind is already sattvic. That's the most perfect mind to pursue self-knowledge. Then they do what? They apply effort. In other words, vyavasayaha. So after the mind is sattvic, owing to their prior sadhana, they apply effort. What kind of effort? In line with the Shastra, the Bhagavad Gita, as we're prescribing. And that leads to jayaha, spiritual victory. And more importantly, any spiritual victory that we have that causes us to go, I am so lucky to be having been exposed to this knowledge, remember that is also not yours. Also give that to Ishvara. Therefore, there is no chance of arrogance or superiority at all. This is why chapter 10 is brilliant, because it totally takes away any chances of owning or trying to be somebody with this knowledge. It totally empties out the person completely and makes the person what? Humble, humility.
So when you're meditating, are you tamasic or?
Meditation requires sattva guna, but also to stay upright, you need a certain amount of raja guna.
Tamasic, you've got to sleep.
Because you're not doing anything.
Nothing, you're going to sleep.
I know what you're getting at. That's not meditation. Then person will be inclined to go to bed if they don't want to do anything. Yeah. A meditator cannot be tamasic, because just to say I want to meditate requires clarity and it requires a certain amount of raja guna. That's why most youngsters in the spiritual world, they're most about practices. Why do they like practices? Because they want to channel their excess raja guna into something that is more graceful, something more spiritual. And then eventually through time they discover, okay, now my mind is extremely sattvic, and some of them then find self-knowledge. Most of them continue pursuing these practices for a lifetime. And what happens is they get stuck and they start to chase sattva guna after sattva guna, just feeling good all day. You know, practices pranayama, and they go into these special states. That's extremely unnecessary, because the mind is ready. When it's ready, it needs to move on into atma jnanam, into Jnana Yoga. And that leads to jayaha, victory. So that's the proper order. Vrishninam vasudevosmi Pandavanam dhananjayaha Muninam apyaham vyasaha Kavinam ushana kavihi.
Among the Yadavas, I am Vasudeva, Krishna. Among the Pandavas, I am Arjuna. Among the seers, I am Vyasa. And among the sages, the preceptor Ushna.
Varshinam Vasudevaha Asmi. So far, Krishna has been speaking of himself as Ishvara. Now, Krishna speaks of himself as an avatara with a physical body. And he's called Vasudeva because he's a putraha of Devaki and Vasudeva. So he says, amongst my people who are called the Yadavas, I am Vasudeva. In other words, his people, called the Yadavas, see Krishna when he was born as how? Do they see him as Ishvara? No, because they do not know what Ishvara is. So therefore you cannot see what you don't know. But they do know him to be an avatara. Krishna is now speaking of himself as that one who appears to his own people, as just Vasudeva. I'm Krishna. Yes, I am special, but my people do not know what it means to say avatara. And then the question is now, why is Krishna glorifying himself as an avatara if there are so many other avatars present, like Rama? According to Paramarthananda, which I'm inclined to agree with, he says it's because Krishna was specifically incarnated for this purpose of dispensing self-knowledge. That's why we have the whole Gita written. He didn't even fight. He was just a guide for Arjuna. So he was the intellect for the Arjuna. But he says, I will not fight. He said that specifically. Whereas all the other avatars, at least most of them, were incarnated. Yes, they did provide some knowledge, but to what? Destroy asuras. To bring back dharma. So they were themselves involved in the restoration of harmony. Pandavanam Dhananjayaha. Among the Pandavas, I am Dhananjaya, which is Arjuna. And Arjuna is one of the favorites amongst the greatest of men, like Bhishma and Drona. He is the most successful in mental ability and physical strength. That means he's most flexible in both. And he also was the first one to receive the Gita Shastra directly from the Lord. And why did Krishna choose Arjuna to receive the Bhagavad Gita and not Dharmaputra or Yudhishthira? Because Yudhishthira was actually more qualified if you think about it. He's the embodiment of Dharma. Why did he choose Arjuna? And Arjuna is the more emotional type. In fact, Arjuna is the emotional type. And Arjuna is not as focused as Yudhishthira. In fact, Arjuna can blow up any time.
Because most of humans are like Arjuna. We got emotions.
Oh, yeah, good. But why did Krishna now choose Arjuna and not Dharmaputra, who was a lot more seemingly qualified to receive the self-knowledge?
The clarity and discipline of the mind.
Yeah, good. What else? Think about it. Because we often say, okay, so you need to be dharmic, you need to be very intellectual, very sharp in your thinking in order to be qualified for self-knowledge. But why did Krishna not choose Dharmaputra, who is a representation of that, and chose Arjuna, who is actually very emotional? He goes through moods constantly.
Entertainment?
No. That's a good guess.
Good teaching too.
Huh? Yeah.
A lot of sattvic qualities.
A lot of qualities.
He was ready to listen.
100% correct. In other words, Arjuna did what? He asked. I'm ready. I want to receive it. I may not be as sharp as Yudhishthira. I may not be as dharmic. I may be an emotional person, but I want self-knowledge. So this means it doesn't matter if you are extremely seemingly qualified or extremely dharmic or extremely intellectual. It means nothing. All that matters is, am I ready to receive this knowledge? So this means an even emotional personality can fully succeed. Often we fall for appearances. We think, okay, if someone is very wise, they speak slow, they have this aura of wisdom. This phenomena? And then we fall for that so easily. They have clothes that represent purity, and they're like an enlightened person. And everything, and like beard, we so easily fall for appearances, and they're dharmic, and the way they speak is so graceful. This is it. They're the one. It means nothing. That's the point. Because one like Arjuna, who is a normal person, is actually the one who is qualified. Aham vyasaha muninam. Among the scholars and the seers and those who have the capacity to think and retain that knowledge, I am Vyasaha. And Vyasaha is the author of the 18 Puranas. He's the author of Mahabharata. and he is also considered to be incarnation of Lord Vishnu. And it is also said that all of the knowledge in the world put together does not even equal one fraction of Vyasa's knowledge. Not in terms of science, like what's inside the brain cell, but I'm talking about as in knowledge of the Upanishads, of the truth, of the existential truth. And he also brought together different Veda mantras which were dispersed throughout the region, because he saw that there's a time from Dvapara to Kali Yuga was changing, so he wanted to put them together into 4 categories for the sake of preserving them and protecting them. Otherwise, through the course of time, they will slowly get burnt, or they will get lost and they will have no validity. So he sensed that, or he thought that it's a good idea to also put them as a written work, because also the times started to make the person lose their memory. Today we don't have very good memories. Back then we used to chant the Vedas. Everything was remembered. It was oral. And today our memories are like hardly used. So all of this was seen, and thus the Vedas were compiled in a written format. And the rule was that every family in India was to get one Veda of those 4. For example, I have the Rig Veda, for me that's my study. And you would study that and then pass it on to your next generation, your family, for the sake of preserving those Vedas and continuing that tradition. It also makes the studies of Veda more accessible and easier, because if you just take one Veda, it's all there. You don't have to look around, so it saves you a lot of time. And it takes 12 years to study one Veda. And why is he called Veda-Vyasa? We often call him Veda-Vyasa. Why Veda? He didn't write, he brought it together. And thus it tells us that he is Veda-Vyasa, which means without Veda-Vyasa, all of this knowledge would not be accessible. We would not be in this class, we would not have the Upanishads, we would probably be depending on alternative methodologies, and so that would be, a loss. However, we have owning and thanking to Veda-Vyasa, we have this knowledge today. He also wrote the Brahma Sutra for the sake of tackling opposing views. In those times, Buddhism was extremely prevalent. So Shankara also, he used to travel around India. He was one of the most argumentative Indians. He used to travel around India and basically have these conversations to try to break down the other system, to show how the Vedic vision stands strong. It cannot be destroyed no matter which way you attack it from. So in the same way, Brahma Sutra was using the same principle of tackling other views. In this way, the Brahma Sutra addresses these potential doubts and establishes the Vedic vision as non-negatable. It cannot be destroyed. It is also said that Adi Shankara is an incarnation of Lord Shiva, and Vyasa is an incarnation of Narayana, but also Vyasa is called Badarayana. How did he get this name, Badarayana? He used to study under the Badara tree, which is also called the Jujube tree or the Indian bear tree. So people saw him under this Badara tree and they then started calling him Badarayana. And thus he wrote Badarayana Sutras, which are also called Brahma Sutras. Kavi Nam Ushana Kavihi. So Kavi is the one who sees the past, the present, and the future. So it's the one who has ESP, extrasensory perception. So Krishna says here, among such Kavi seers, I am Ushana. Who is Ushana? He is the guru of all the asuras. Now the asuras are power hungry. So imagine being a guru to a power hungry student. What would that result in? They would not listen. They will come, but they will not listen. Because what is a power-hungry person? Rajaguna. So they're always thinking, how can I use this for myself? How can I commercialize this? How can I disagree with this? However, more importantly, he also wrote a very important work on ethics called Shukra Niti, which tells you exactly what it means to follow a life of ethics, a life of what is right. So for example, a composition which lets you know things that you should never reveal to other people. For example, Don't reveal your age unless asked, right? Or don't reveal your problems to other people unless there's an agreement to talk. Because revealing problems to other people does not help the person, and it also contaminates the other mind with problems of my own. That means I trigger their own mind now because I'm sharing my problems. And it's also said it does not cure if you just share it. And what do we do today? What's our psychological means of solving problems? Call up a friend and share my problems. In other words, I am illegally contaminating, not illegally, but I am contaminating another person's mind with my own problems. And I'm supposed to be relieved. So in other words, it's a win-lose situation. Dando damayatam asmi, nitir asmi jigishatam, maunam chaivasmi guhyanam, jnanam jnanavatamaham.
I am the discipline of those who enforce discipline. I am the justice of those who want success, and I am silence among the secrets. Of those who have knowledge, I am that knowledge.
Dandaha damayatam asmi. Amongst various methods of discipline, I am the rod of punishment, danda. And there are 4 ways to discipline a human being, a person who has strayed off the path of the good. This means they are either hurting themselves or they are hurting someone else. And these 4 ways are also effective for children, and they are coming from the Shastra. So we can learn some methods of bringing someone back onto Shreyaha, onto the path of the good. And they are, I'm going to list them from 1 to 4, and they go from least effective to most effective. The first one is Sama, offering warm and friendly advice. In other words, I sit down with them when they are feeling good, you're feeling good. That means there's first rapport between 2 people. You never offer your advice when there is disconnection, when there's a discord. You make sure that there's a connection first. And in that time, then you sit down and you simply offer them some advice as to alternative ways to look at this. No, it's not a good idea. So the first method is more like a command. But a command is only followed if there's a relationship between 2 people. For example, a child and a mom, the child will usually follow because the child respects the mother and respects the father. But if there is no respect, then the first method is not going to work no matter what. Do as you're told, because that is for your own good. The second is dana, gift. Now, why would you want to give a gift to someone who is not following the rules? What would be the reason for that?
Bribe them.
Inspire them.
Huh?
Inspire
Gift, reward.
Show them the way, show them the benefit.
Why would you want to give a gift to a child who is straying off the path of the good? If they're doing something naughty, or it seems like they're about to do something naughty, and you buy them a gift, what does that imply?
To win their affection.
Distraction?
Much better. Excellent. In other words, when I buy a gift that the child relates to, you don't just buy any gift, then I take their mind off that which they are attracted to. I bring their mind back onto something else. So I redirect their mind onto something that is more useful. For example, one method is to buy them something they can work with their hands, something that expands their mind, not just an iPad, because that's what parents do today, and they just give the iPad and the child loses itself into that iPad. So give something to the person that they will engage with, that they will want to just almost get addicted to, because they will keep the mind solidly focused on this gift and not onto that potential damaging circumstance.
That works well with dogs as well.
Yeah.
when I'm walking my dog and he's pawing, distracted, got a little schmacko and he bang, straight on again.
Feed your child every time they follow the advice. Third one is Veda. Involves creating a doubt in her mind. Why would you want to create a doubt? Because is it not true that we only do those things which we have no doubts about? We never do those things which we have a doubt about. So if they're following the path or straying to the path of the potentially unpleasant or adharmic, then I need to create a doubt in his or her mind. Now, how do you create a doubt in someone's mind?
Point out a consequence.
Yeah.
Differentiation.
Good, excellent. So how do I create a doubt? I educate them. I educate them on why this is not in your best interest. What often does not work is to say, here's why you are damaging the environment. Most minds are not mature to understand this. Most will say, well, I don't care about others, the environment. So thus, at the beginning stages, how do we educate them? Here's why it's good for your own sake. Here's how following this will actually cause hurt in the future. And here's how others who have done this have suffered. So you show them some examples how this is not right. For example, today a big problem in the schools is the child, as much as you train them, if they go to school, what happens? Other kids will show them some sexual images. They will show them porn or something. So, and the mom and the dad, they don't know this is happening. And the child is doing this. So how do you prevent this kind of almost inevitable circumstance? You first infer what is it that they're likely going to do on the basis of what the children today do. So then you say, okay, so now let's educate them and show them how what they're about to do or what they may do is actually extremely damaging to their psyche. And then you show them, okay, well, here's how this kind of image or this kind of thought will lead into depression, into, very dull mind. You won't be able to, your creativity will go down. And so all of these things get shown to the person, and the person's like, oh, interesting. Okay, I haven't considered this, but now, having seen this, I better stay away. As children, I remember I was watching this TV and we had sexual education. It was called sex education. And we used to watch this. I remember this one woman, she said, few moments of pleasure and a lifetime of regret. And that has always stuck with me even to this day. Few moments of pleasure in any aspect, but a lifetime of regret. And I was, like 9 years old, and that stuck with me. In other words, I got educated as a child, and I saw a real life scenario, and that really made a huge impact. So in the same way, how do we educate children? We show them the consequences, real life circumstances, real life things that they can relate to. And that makes a big impact in the future, in their adulthood. And then number 4, when nothing else works, danda. In other words, we need to use punishment to deter from this behavior repeating again. Repeating a wrong action that can only escalate and get repeated next time. How do you not punish? The first is to use humiliation. This means the person gets embarrassed because it damages the person's psyche. In other words, it builds resentment and thoughts of revenge because they've humiliated me. So that is not how to punish. Another way not to punish is to set unfair guidelines. Just to put a big consequence, like you're now grounded for 10 days. A mind cannot handle that. So therefore, one should never set unfair or unreasonable punishments onto a person or a child because they're simply not trained to handle it that much. So then how do we then set punishment or consequences? By putting a small scale, and then next time we increase that scale, and then next time the scale of that punishment increases. So for example, you're now grounded for 1 day. Next time this happens, it will be 2 days. Next time, it will be 3 days. So there's a gradual build-up. That way, the person knows there is a consequence that will increase in its quantity every time this is repeated. Therefore, this avoids this damaging method of unjust guidelines. You cannot now, I'm going to now take away your computer forever. That's going to build what? Anger and resentment. And how do we punish? Incremental steps. We never go overboard. What happens often between a parent and a child is the parent says, next time this happens, here's the consequence. But the parent does not follow up. So what happens then? The trust between the child and the parent gets damaged. So next time, the words of the parents do not get as respected or as followed as they could have been. So therefore, it is very important, once the guideline is set, that the person follows through no matter what. Otherwise, over time, the trust is lost, it's broken. And then eventually the kid's no longer listening to the parent, or the person, the employee is no longer listening to the employer. So this means there's a consistency in one's word. This is called integrity. Lastly, it is sometimes necessary to apply a spank. That means a physical contact involvement. In fact, there is a certain reality to, in the old days at least, when parents used to spank us, or it was even in schools we used to get a hit. In fact, I'm very grateful that this was actually the way, at least in my times, because when there's a spank or when there's a hit, it works immediately. It's like instant, okay, never again. And today there is this sort of talk that it damages the psyche of the child, but that's very questionable. So we can't really say a definitive. It depends on the relationship. So punishment, physical contact is the last resort. So the physical contact only is once all of these options are exhausted and there's nothing else. Then instantly I am that danda. I am that rod of punishment which brings instant discipline. And then Krishna says, those who enforce punishment for the sake of discipline, I am, says Krishna, that discipline. Nitihi jigi shatam. Amongst those who are victorious, I am nitihi, I am strategy or diplomacy, which leads to success. In other words, any kind of victory that you have gained through justice, that victory I am. In other words, you cannot call victory if it's done through cheating or lying. That is not victory. That's called a coward. For example, a country invading another country, which is called coup de main, or an invasion. What is an invasion? You attack without a warning. That's not victory. That's cowardice. So that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about that victory which was gained through dharma, which was gained through proper means. That victory, I am also. Therefore, if a person ever has this opportunity to be recognized by a community or the masses because of something they've done well for the community or the country or for their family, remember, that victory is not yours either. That is also Ishwara's. Maunam cha eva asmi guhyanam. Among the various devices which are employed to maintain secrecy, I am the best device, silence. How do you maintain a secret? Through silence. Now, how long does a person maintain that secret? Depends on what?
The secret.
Okay, think about it this way. What kind of guna would you have to say something? Raja guna. So in other words, the more Raja guna dominant the mind is, the less capacity I have to hold a secret. Therefore, next time someone says, can you hold a secret? Can you really hold a secret? The moment you say no, that is great. But if you say yes, that is probably a no. Why? Because a person with a sattva guna mind is not interested in holding secrets, because it's a burden. Holding someone else's secrets is disturbing my own mind, so I don't want to hear your secrets. Therefore, can you hold a secret? Yes, it's probably a no. Most cases. Also, maunam means paramatma. That means I am that silence which witnesses the silence of sound, which means I am paramatma, the greatest secret. That's why chapter 9 is called Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam, the king of knowledge, the king of secrets. Jnanam, jnanavatam, aham. of those who are privileged to Atma Jnanam, I am that knowledge, because of which the Jnani or the Jivan Muktaha enjoys one's freedom, or because of which the Jivan Muktaha is free. Therefore, even self-knowledge that a person enjoys or has assimilated, that is also not mine. That is also because of Ishvara. So this means whenever a namaskara is done to a jnani, then that namaskara is handed over to Ishvara, because a jnani knows this is not mine. This self-knowledge, which is clear and it's firm, it's nishta jnanam, it is not mine, because I borrowed this from the Shastra. And the capacity to assimilate this through my own effort and my own understanding is also Bhagavan's. Therefore, nothing here can I claim as mine. How do you hand over something to Ishvara? Because isn't it true when you hand over, it implies it's an object? So how do you hand over things to Ishvara?
Surrender.
You acknowledge.
You acknowledge and say thank you, Ishvara, for the knowledge
Surrender,
you've given me.
just surrender.
So I acknowledge that it's Ishvara's glory, not my own.
Okay, good. So that description is what a Virat or Vishvarupa Bhakta does. So when someone compliments a Vishvarupa Bhakta, someone who is yet to have firm knowledge, they would say, this praise or this criticism is Ishvara's nimitta upadana karanam. It is not mine. How does a jnani hand over anything to Ishvara?
He can't.
Good. Why not?
Because Ishvara himself is knowledge.
Excellent. So to hand over something contradicts the non-dual nature of reality. In other words, who is handing over what to what? To hand over implies Dvaitam. So what is there to hand over if all here is not two, all here is one? Therefore, a jnani neither hands over, because there's nothing to hand over, nor does he own anything, because both handing over and owning are both mithya. They're all anatma. And I am the presence because of which there is knowledge of handing over and knowledge of owning. That means they both have nothing to do with that very presence.
About the Gayatri-Mantra, Lord Brahma created the mantra which is of 3 lines, and it represents 3 Vedas. What about the 4th Veda then?
The what?
The 4th Veda.
Good. So the Atharva Veda is not included because it is mainly rituals. Therefore, it was not necessary. And Brahmaji expressed this Gayatri Mantra through Vishwamitra, because he needs a vehicle, he needs a person. And therefore Vishwamitra, in the depths of one's meditation, starts to chant this mantra out.
You just mentioned about time and space. Do you think there's anything in nature where it would be time is equal to 0? So everything is frozen in time and space. And that, does Veda talk about anything that if time is equal to 0, what happens with our karmas, actions and reactions?
Yeah, the same thing that happens when you go to sleep. You simply, upon waking, continue where you left off. So there's no ending to anything. No one gets a fresh start from the beginning. And this person only gets out of the cycle when the sanchita karma and agami karma is burnt up through self-knowledge.
Could you say that deep sleep or that time 0 is going back into potential before it then comes back awake and back into manifestation?
It is always running. It is either running in manifest or it is running in potential. There is no time stopping, because the essence of time is to run, to tick, to go, to progress. Now when samskara comes, thus a new universe comes. Why? Because of time. And time is a potential in Maya. So even when the whole universe resolutes, it is still ticking in potential. Because then if it wasn't, then you would say, well, what instigates this new world? Because it can't be Brahman, because Brahman is free of time and space. So it is Maya itself, which is also inclusive of time. Right? Time is included in Maya. That's why we say the first thing that manifests is time and space, and then all objects in time and space. Yeah. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukha bhag bhavit. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.